Amidst the quiet night of Seattle, when architect Elias Thorne once again tossed and turned with endless loops of thought and profound exhaustion, psychological well-being opened up like a peaceful rest stop within the immense universe. This is a place where minds burdened by pressure can completely let go, allowing deep blocks of knowledge to transform into a soothing lullaby that calms the night. Tonight's journey will guide the way to one of the most fascinating and liberating possibilities. Modern science has begun to whisper about the idea that our universe might not be alone, and who knows, the versions of what should have been that we always yearn for might also exist somewhere out there, carrying the weight of our unresolved choices. Let us look deeply into the reality of a 34-year-old man named Elias, sitting hidden within the pale yellow light of a high-rise apartment. Before him lay unfinished architectural blueprints scattered across the table, intertwined with long cold cups of coffee that had lost their last trace of warmth. Through the transparent window glass, the murmuring sound of car horns echoing from the mist-covered streets of Seattle resonated like a ceaseless reminder of a world that is always rushing by without waiting for anyone. Elias sat there with heavy eyes, carrying a profound exhaustion that seeped into every cell. Yet, that exhaustion completely did not originate from the complex lines on paper or the massive workload weighing heavily on his shoulders every day. The true weariness that eroded him was born from an invisible but incredibly sharp pressure, which was the blind belief that he must always calculate and optimize every turning point in his life. That we are frequently swept into an exhausting psychological game where the mind constantly tortures itself with assumptions about a more perfect future if we had turned left instead of turning right at some point in the past. This modern-day illness, which contemporary psychology names decision fatigue, has turned a sharp intellect into an inescapable labyrinth. It forces people like Elias to continuously sketch out hundreds of scenarios for a single decision, only to eventually become paralyzed by their own freedom of choice. In a frantic effort to design a flawless life, we unintentionally strip away the joy of experiencing existence in the present moment, turning every step into an equation of risk that needs to be meticulously controlled. The immense pressure from trying to mold unpredictable variables has taken away the right to make mistakes, the right to be a natural living creature groping its way through this world. Decision fatigue not only drains physical energy but also blankets the soul in a dull gray fog, making us forget that there is no single path leading to absolute fulfillment. Even when sitting in the silence of the empty room, Elias' mind still echoed with the deafening sound of 10,000 branching paths simultaneously beckoning, turning a rare night of rest into an endless internal tribunal, igniting the agonizing question of whether there is any other way to liberate the mind from this harsh cycle. To free the mind from this brutal grinding, let us temporarily look away from the scattered blueprints of the silent three-dimensional space and together step into a much stranger realm where the conventional laws of the macroscopic world begin to shatter. If we magnify the structure of the cosmos, moving past the stars, past the planets, and going deep into the very bottom of tiny atoms, we will encounter the miraculous and deeply mysterious quantum world. In this microscopic world, the universe behaves in a manner that can be described as almost magical compared to what we knew about a century ago. Quantum theory points out that the tiniest particles of this reality do not move like solid objects following a single predictable trajectory. Instead of being distinctly black and white, they behave like shimmering waves of countless possibilities. Before a measurement or observation actually takes place, a quantum particle is not confined to a predetermined outcome, but rather floats in a probability cloud of a myriad of different potentials, where all possible states simultaneously exist in a fragilely beautiful balance. Physicists often call this poetic phenomenon quantum superposition, a concept that sounds complex but actually harbors an incredibly simple and profound notion about the nature of reality. Imagine a traveler standing at a crossroads where countless paths stretch out and beckon in a multitude of different directions. Instead of having to immediately make a definitive choice to walk down one single path, this quantum traveler miraculously decides to step forward and explore all of those paths at the exact same time. They are not bound by the linearity of time or the limitations of space. Yet the strangest thing in this entire story is that as soon as we direct our gaze toward the traveler to perform an observation, all the intertwined possibilities instantly collapse, and we only see them standing quietly on exactly one single path, facing one single reality. And this is the moment we bring that magical quantum lens back to shine upon the high-rise apartment in the misty city, to look deep into the exhausted mind of the man named Elias. It is not difficult to realize that his mind is unconsciously imitating the exact behavior of those subatomic particles when continuously pushing itself into a state of psychological quantum superposition. His paralysis by analysis is not due to a lack of intelligence or incompetence, but on the contrary, it stems from an overly rich imagination and a fierce desire to preserve every possibility in its entirety. Faced with any decision, whether as small as designing a wall space for a new project or as grand as choosing a direction for both his career and his love life, Elias always refuses to make a final observation to close the matter. He carries within him a profound illusion that as long as he hesitates, as long as his mind lingers at the crossroads and relentlessly analyzes every scenario, then all of those brilliant futures still retain their complete opportunity to become reality. Elias is straining himself to carry the impossible effort of a creature made of flesh and bone trying to maintain existence on countless paths all at once, something that originally belongs only to the privilege of microscopic particles. Lurking behind that hesitation is a terrifying fear that the moment he makes a decision, the probability wave function will permanently collapse, a single reality will be born, and that means he must ruthlessly kill off all the other wonderful versions of himself on the paths not chosen. He fears that choosing this path will automatically strip away a glory or a radiant future quietly waiting on the other path. And so his mind swells to contain thousands of parallel scenarios while his physical body remains completely frozen in reality. The agonizing pain and exhaustion that erode him night after night do not come from superficial busyness, but from the act of bracing his sails against the flow of time, desperately yearning to possess every potential that has never been unlocked. By locking himself in a perpetual state of superposition, Elias has turned his own mind into a massive probability cloud hovering amidst countless what-ifs and maybes, only to ultimately end up not truly living fully in any future, but merely remaining trapped forever at a dark, cold crossroads of hesitation and absolute terror in the face of the power of choice. But what would happen if the mind's ultimate fear of losing opportunities is merely an illusion, and the universe is actually far more forgiving than we ever imagined? To answer this question, let us look to a groundbreaking philosophical perspective initiated by a young physicist named Hugh Everett in the 1950s. Instead of accepting the traditional assumption of quantum mechanics that nature somehow is forced to choose a single outcome when observation occurs and makes all other beautiful possibilities vanish forever, Everett proposed a highly audacious idea. He suggested that instead of disappearing, all possible outcomes actually occur completely. Through his lens, the universe does not collapse into a single rigid reality, but gently divides. Every time a quantum event with multiple possibilities happens, the universe branches itself into parallel histories, and each branch contains an entirely different outcome. Revisualize the image of the traveler standing amidst the crossroads in the dense forest, but this time when the path diverges, instead of agonizingly choosing one way and leaving the rest to fade into the past, the traveler simply continues to walk on all the paths simultaneously. Each path leads into a distinct landscape, weaving its own independent story. From this perspective, the paths we do not choose in a current world do not vanish at all, but silently persist and continuously unfold in separate versions of reality. Welcome to the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, where reality is not a solitary straight line moving forward, but a gigantic tree reaching out with countless branches of history that endlessly multiply. This branching is not a rare phenomenon, but it happens continuously and ceaselessly, weaving a colossal tapestry of existence that stretches into infinity. Now, let us place this profound block of knowledge into the stormy mind of Elias, to see how it transforms into an incredibly miraculous antidote for the soul of the exhausted man. If the many worlds theory is true, then the entire massive burden Elias is straining to carry on his shoulders suddenly becomes meaningless and endearingly absurd. Our dear Elias always punishes himself for not being able to fully live every potential, but this philosophy is smiling brightly, telling him that he absolutely does not need to try to live every life all at once, because the vast universe out there has already done that for him. In some spatial branch, a version of Elias who chose to turn down the architect job is passionately drawing free-spirited paintings on a sunlit street of an unfamiliar city. In another timeline branch, a braver Elias is living peaceful and happy days alongside a romance that seemed lost in regret. Every possibility that he once lay awake regretting, every decision that should have been the greatest, has been and is being fully realized by countless other versions of Elias within an immense web of realities so vast that the human mind cannot directly comprehend it entirely. Once separated, those branches of life drift far apart smoothly like scattered ripples on a calm lake, never intersecting again. Those versions exist independently, fully experiencing their own sequence of events, and they too only remember a single past exactly the way we are reminiscing about our own lives. This realization does not bring a sense of hopelessness or alienation, but quite the opposite. It is a liberation deeply imbued with the tolerant humor of the great cosmos. The only responsibility of Elias, as well as of all of us, is not to stubbornly cling to thousands of scenarios or endlessly resent ourselves for accidentally misstepping at some crossroad in the past. The sole responsibility, and also the most beautiful thing he can do right now, is to allow his shoulders to drop, to relax, and firmly refuse to carry the perfect career or the romantic turns of other timelines. Let those talented versions of Elias in other cosmic branches do their part well. Your mission in the current timeline, on the specific branch of the cosmic tree where you are fortunate enough to stand right now, is simply to be fully present with all your senses and deeply experience the reality unfolding right before your eyes that you do not need to feel remorseful or sorrowful for the unlived lives, because truly no life is ever wasted. They are merely being lived by other parts of yourself in the boundless ocean of the quantum realm. Instead of continuing to petrify yourself at cold crossroads out of fear of making mistakes, you can absolutely step forward strongly with a relieved smile, deeply understanding that no matter which path you choose, your existence remains eternally complete and far greater than what this tiny anxious mind can ever imagine. But that beautiful quantum branching is still not the only way for us to envision a greater reality. Let us step back even further, beyond the world of microscopic particles, to return to the very first moment of all things. Long before galaxies formed and the first stars lit up the darkness, the universe experienced a moment so dramatic that it reshaped the entire space in a mere blink of an eye. Physicists call this moment cosmic inflation. Imagine an incredibly tiny region of space, smaller than even a subatomic particle, in a tiny fraction of the first second right after the universe originated. That tiny spatial region expanded at a terrifyingly rapid rate, faster than anything we can observe in the universe today. That lightning-fast expansion process did not just happen once and then stop everywhere. Instead, it acted like a chain reaction. While some regions of space slowed down to form galaxies and stars, in other regions, inflation continued ceaselessly. This continuous expansion process birthed countless new pockets of space that gradually slowed down and formed their own universes. The immense cosmos might take a shape similar to a giant layer of foam made up of a myriad of bubbles. You can imagine this like a pot of water beginning to boil, where small bubbles appear, grow larger, and float completely separate from one another. And now, as we take this grand concept of cosmic inflation and shine it upon the quiet space of the apartment in the city of Seattle, we will recognize a similar phenomenon silently ravaging Elias' mind. His panic attacks essentially follow an inflationary expansion mechanism exactly like the primordial moment of all things. Recall the times Elias accidentally made a tiny mistake in an architectural drawing or simply sent a late email reply to a partner. At the initial moment, it was merely a small trivial event, an insignificant seed of panic, smaller than a subatomic particle in the vast space of the mind. Yet, instead of letting that seed quietly pass, Elias' exhausted mind activated a process of psychological inflation at a terrifying speed. In a fraction of a second, that seed of panic swelled up with uncontrollable velocity, dragging along a series of the worst-case scenarios that besieged him. A late email instantly expanded into the fracturing thought that he would lose this crucial project, then continued to erupt into the extreme belief that his career was uncontrollably sliding downhill, and finally enveloped his entire perception in a gigantic bubble universe of catastrophe. Elias became tightly trapped inside that suffocating bubble, where all the light of truth was bent by the gravitational pull of sheer terror that he could no longer see the reality of a peaceful night or a trivial mistake that could easily be fixed, but only saw his entire future crumbling to pieces. That catastrophic bubble expanded so fast that it swallowed up every peaceful space in his soul, stripping away the air for him to breathe freely, and made him mistakenly believe that the tiny initial seed was the entire terrifying reality he was forced to confront. However, once we understand the absurd inflationary mechanism of that psychological universe, it is also the time we hold in our hands the key to liberate ourselves from the prison we built, and to do this, let us borrow a deeply soothing and wise perspective from Eastern meditation arts to apply a gentle dose of first aid for the bleeding soul of the man on the high rise of Seattle City. The first important thing, and also the most profound awakening that Elias needs to realize right now amidst the noisy sounds of self-torment, is the truth that he is absolutely not that inflating bubble of panic. We modern humans frequently fall into an incredibly subtle cognitive trap when we equate our entire ego and existence with the worst thoughts occurring in our heads. When anxiety inflates and engulfs every corner of awareness, we mistakenly think that we are that fear itself, mistakenly think we are the small helpless victim struggling hopelessly inside the suffocating membrane of an irreversible catastrophe. But reality is far grander and more forgiving than that. Take a slow step back and re-examine your true position in this inner universe. Our Elias is neither the dark seed of panic nor the pitch-black cloud of worst-case scenarios waiting to swallow the present, but deep within him is the vast, silent ocean of nothingness that nurtures and contains the entire birth and extinction of all those illusory bubbles. Just like the immense sky that is never scratched or harmed by the fiercest storm sweeping across, our primal mind cannot be torn apart by the phantoms it accidentally creates itself. The sky is simply a tranquil space that allows the storm to perform its finite power, howl for a brief moment, and then naturally dissolve into the void, returning the clear expanse as if there had never been any disturbance. Elias' job right now is not to try to use willpower or the tension of his muscles to pierce the catastrophe bubble, or to desperately wield weapons to fight against its inflation, because an ironic paradox of the mind is that the more we resist, the more we accidentally pump life energy into making that inflation persist. Fear is nourished by our very own panicked attention. Instead, the highest art of popping the bubble does not require any violent effort, but comes from completely letting go of the need to intervene or fix it. The only and most courageous thing we need to do is sit quietly, drop our tense shoulders, observe and recognize the mind's fury with an unperturbed gaze, without judging, without trying to extinguish it, and without fearfully running away. When Elias simply acts as a silent, profoundly wise witness, refusing to participate in the tragic play directed by his own mind. That artificial inflationary process will instantly be cut off from its nourishing fuel source without the complicity of panicked attention, without scenarios drawn out after scenarios. The bubble of anxiety, no matter how massive and frightening, will gradually lose its fragile surface tension and automatically deflate, vanishing into nothingness. You will feel an immediate relief spreading across your chest, as if a 1,000-pound boulder has just been lifted from your heart, upon realizing that you have the absolute privilege to choose not to fuel the illusions that are draining your life force. By returning to be the vast, silent ocean of nothingness, ready to receive every ripple that rises and falls without attachment, Elias has granted himself a beautiful grace to find peace right in the eye of the storm. He restores the boundless space for gentle, free breaths, and from there, he can completely smile with witty grace at the bizarre fragility of the fears that once imprisoned him, returning to the city night its inherent tranquility. Once we have learned how to diffuse the bombs of panic with the vast silence of the ocean of consciousness, tonight's journey gently drifts us toward a deeper question about the structure of reality and of ourselves. To thoroughly comprehend the root cause of the exhaustion draining Elias' vitality, let us together explore one of physics' most ambitious efforts to decode the very end of nature, known as string theory. Instead of picturing the fundamental particles that make up matter as lifeless dots, this theory proposes that all things are woven from incredibly tiny vibrating strings of energy. Much like how different vibrations on a violin string create diverse high and low notes, the different patterns of vibration of these microscopic strings have birthed the entire rich material world that we see. However, for the mathematical symphony of string theory to resonate perfectly and consistently, cosmic space requires the existence of more than the familiar three dimensions that we constantly experience. Conventional perception binds us to a world with only three basic dimensions, which are length, width, and height. These three directions allow us to move forward, move backward, turn left, turn right, or reach up and lower down. But the realm of quantum physics whispers that beyond those obvious three macroscopic dimensions, the universe also conceals invisible extra dimensions of space. These dimensions do not disappear, but rather they are tightly curled up into incredibly tiny geometric shapes, hiding deep within the subatomic level to the point where all the most sophisticated measuring instruments of humanity cannot see them. The existence of all things, of radiant stars and vast oceans, actually depends entirely on how the energy strings vibrate within these mysterious, tightly curled dimensions. Now, if we use this sharp quantum lens to gently peel back the social mask that Elias carries every day, we will recognize a heartbreaking parallel. Modern society, with its rushing rhythm and stereotypical standards of success, frequently forces humans to package their entire complex existence into an incredibly cramped three-dimensional box. That box creates a perfect facade, showcasing the only three social dimensions that this world desires and praises in an adult man, which are success, independence, and busyness. Elias has unintentionally built for himself a flat and flawless identity based on those three coordinate axes, turning himself into a tireless production machine, a cold, sharp architect who solves every problem without needing any reliance or help from those around him. His time is always filled with dense schedules, creating the illusion of an incredibly meaningful and complete life. Yet, hidden deep beneath the surface of that glossy three-dimensional life, concealed behind dry blueprints and bitter cups of coffee, is an inner universe with spatial dimensions compressed to the point of suffocation. Forcing himself to curl up under the pressure of perfection, Elias has hidden away a dimension of vulnerability, where he truly yearns to bow his head, lower all his defenses, and admit that he is exhaustingly tired. He tightly curled up a dimension containing the desire for pure art, where his soul desperately wishes to splash rebellious strokes of paint onto a canvas instead of cautiously calculating every dry millimeter for magnificent commercial buildings. And at the very depth of silence, He locked away a dimension of nameless sorrow, an unprovoked romantic melancholy that is an essential part of the human experience but is viewed by society as a system error needing to be thoroughly eliminated. Elias' extreme exhaustion does not merely come from him having to constantly polish those brilliant three-dimensional surfaces, but a large part of his vitality is drained by the massive effort to crush and curl up the most genuine pieces of his soul. We often mistakenly believe that ruthlessly trimming ourselves to fit the three-dimensional mold of perfection will bring freedom and recognition, but in truth, the act of denying profound dimensions is the very root of all the suffering and emptiness gnawing at us every day. Just as the universe would collapse without its hidden dimensions, the human soul will wither if we refuse to grant the right of existence to the most fragile aspects of ourselves. As long as Elias continues to put on an act, as long as he fears the subtle vibrations from the hidden corners of trauma or the pure desires that have never been spoken, his internal symphony will continue to echo with broken, offbeat tones, and he will forever remain a bewildered exile lost right inside his own magnificent and vast universe of the soul. To heal the profound fractures born from self-denial, we need a gentle antidote to escape the giant trap of the toxic self-improvement industry, which always preaches rigid dogmas. Modern society and the tens of thousands of personal development books out there constantly haunt us with a dangerous illusion that an ideal life is a perfect straight line, where a person is only allowed to move forward at an increasingly faster speed, reaping more achievements, and never allowed to lose rhythm. But quantum physics and Great Eastern philosophy smile to bring us a far more forgiving perspective through an incredibly simple metaphor about a long hose lying across a quiet lawn. If we stand from a far distance observing that hose, it looks completely like a thin straight line with only a single dimension. Standing from that angle, anyone would think that a tiny creature on it has only two choices, which are moving forward or backward along the endless length of the hose. That is exactly how society out there is looking at Elias, judging him by the tedious linear ladders of his career, forcing him to slide down the coordinate axis of measurable success. Yet, when we step much closer, change our viewing angle, and observe with more thorough eyes, we will discover an wonderfully liberating truth, because the hose is not flat at all, but has a curved surface wrapping around it. A tiny ant crawling on it is not imprisoned by the command to go straight, but has the absolute free privilege to stroll around the circumference of the hose, exploring every curved nook of that surface. For those watching from afar, closed up in their prejudice, that curled-up dimension forever remains a hidden secret. Much like that little ant, our cosmic space can also harbor additional dimensions folded up into incredibly tiny geometric structures. Elias is also not a machine programmed to move exhaustingly on the straight path of an architectural career or social responsibilities. He carries within him the sacred privilege of being allowed to walk around the surface of his own soul, allowed to freely explore the curled-up dimensions that are being suppressed. It is time he needs to remove the heavy armor of the relentless optimization effort, to smile and accept the presence of every hidden corner inside. Nameless sorrows, tears rolling down in the lonely night, or the yearning to let go of dry principles to paint rebellious splashes of color are not obstacles blocking the way or mistakes needing to be erased. In the grand symphony of string theory, the different shapes of the hidden dimensions will lead to different vibration patterns of the energy strings. And it is exactly these distinct vibration patterns that will create an incredibly rich variety of fundamental particles, constructing all things. In a similar manner, the traumas, the most fragile moments of weakness of Elias are not malfunctions of the mind, but they are actually incredibly delicate multidimensional vibration forms working day and night to weave the unique material of his soul. Without the vibration of pain, we will never achieve the vibration of compassion. That without the vibration of wavering, lost moments, we can never mold a profound empathy for the fragile beauty of human existence. Denying trauma to force oneself to wear a cloak of toxic positivity is the cruelest act, stripping away the right to vibrate from the soul's vocal cords, rendering the melody of life dry and hollow. Therefore, the immediate first aid dose for Elias' exhausted mind is not to learn another time management skill or seek a strategy to become more successful, but to gently allow himself the permission to vibrate at all frequencies. He has the right to be tired, the right to collapse, and the right to be a complex creature with thousands of intertwined dimensions, rather than a proud but lonely arrow shooting through the void. Upon realizing that freedom of multidimensional vibration, Elias will feel his chest suddenly expand, all the massive boulders of expectation dissolving, making way for the most gentle acceptance toward every fragment, no matter how broken. Right inside himself. As Elias begins to accept the curled-up dimensions and allows himself to vibrate with the most authentic rhythms, we drift toward an incredibly fascinating question originating not from the field of cosmology, but from a simple observation about technology. Over the past few decades, humans have become increasingly excellent at creating simulated environments. Try to imagine that many centuries in the future, an advanced civilization will possess computers powerful enough to simulate entire planets or even entire universes. The creatures living inside will see the stars in the sky and perceive their world as completely real. This simulation hypothesis suggests that everything around us could entirely be just a layer of code nested within one another. Reality might be arranged into layers of nested worlds, exactly like mirrors placed opposite each other, creating an endlessly extending corridor of reflected images. When we bring this bold hypothesis to shine on Elias' life, we will gain a deeper understanding of the feeling of alienation that is gnawing at his soul day and night. Elias' modern life is shaped by the endless loop of ringing alarm clocks. Every morning, workloads that must be completed on time, bills needing to be paid, and countless heavy expectations from American society. That optimizing cycle operates exactly like a giant matrix, relentlessly sucking dry the vitality of the young architect. He plunges into the race for his career, for purchasing expensive items, for maintaining a flawless image of success, without ever realizing that he is rolling along a pre-programmed set of rules. The sense of alienation appears when Elias equates his entire worth with the illusory avatar character running tirelessly in that simulated space. Elias feels completely exhausted because he has completely submerged himself in the artificial regulations of society and mistakenly believes that they are absolute laws of physics impossible to break. He unintentionally forgets a sacred truth that he himself is fundamentally the player experiencing this world, not a numb, controlled piece of code. Ultimate suffering is born when a free consciousness imprisons itself in a script written by someone else, obediently playing the role of a perfect cog in an emotionless, giant machine. The standards of success, busyness, or the benchmarks he always strives to achieve are actually just illusory command lines installed by the surrounding environment. We, just like Elias, frequently lose our way in the very systems created by humans, thinking that every step, every crossroad is a life or death matter carrying immense weight. By stepping back and observing this rushed rhythm of life as a simulated script, Elias can begin to strip away the brutal power that expectations are imposing on his mind. He does not need to smash the system or run away from the current world, but only needs a gentle awakening right in the heart of the matrix to realize that he has the right to decide how to react to every command line. Upon comprehending the illusory nature of optimizing cycles, Elias will freely breathe again, no longer a submissive line of code but a profoundly wise observer, smiling at the grand game of reality and refusing to let his life force be drained by the limits fabricated by the human mind. Now that Elias has begun to see through the veil of illusion of optimizing cycles, let us take another step with him to truly master this game by awakening a highly subtle weapon that is frequently forgotten in the modern world, which is cosmic humor. If everything around us, the skyscrapers, the million-dollar contracts, or the ladders of fame are truly just pieces in a grand simulation game, then our constant tense frowning and turning every moment into a life or death battle is ultimately the worst system error. Overly dramatizing issues does not make us greater or more important in the eyes of the stars, but merely strips away the most primal joy of the privilege to exist and experience. Our modern society always yearns to mold relentless working machines, people who constantly scowl at charts and deadlines, but inadvertently forgets a profound truth that the essence of life fundamentally takes the shape of a dance or a piece of music, that the core purpose of a dance has never been to forcefully rush to the end point on the stage, nor does one listen to a symphony solely to wait for the final note to ring out. Plunging headlong to sprint through life experiences just to reach invisible finish lines is a disastrous misunderstanding of the rules of the cosmic game. Like children immersed in building sandcastles on the beach, we pour our heart into our creations, but are also ready to smile when the wave sweeps by and washes it all away, because true joy lies in the process of shaping, not in the permanence of that sand fortress. By gently transforming into a philosophical entertainer in the heart of the rushing matrix, Elias absolutely does not need to tear up the unfinished blueprints or cast away the responsibilities of a talented architect. Instead, he only needs to learn how to take a deep step back. Inhale a long breath, and offer a forgiving smile at the hilariously absurd pace of life that humanity has voluntarily imprisoned itself in. Try to imagine him standing quietly amidst a bustling intersection in the city of Seattle, watching streams of people rushing back and forth in the fog, everyone burdened by invisible weights fabricated by their own minds, and suddenly realizing that we are all participating in a grand play where the fact that the actors forget they are acting is the very root cause of endless suffering. When Elias begins to see the pressures from partners, bills needing to be paid, or the strict standards of success no longer as 1,000-pound boulders crushing his chest, but merely as small, pre-programmed obstacles meant to increase the drama in the game of life, he will instantly find an unparalleled relief spreading through his neural pathways. He will still wake up every morning, go to work, and continue to create beautiful living spaces with his talent, but now those actions are no longer driven by the cold whip of the fear of being left behind, but are uplifted by the spirit of a free, unburdened stroll. True liberation in this world has never required us to use violence to smash the structure of the matrix or to flee into some wilderness, but merely asks us to completely alter our internal lens when facing any adversity. Once you can chuckle at the overly dramatic nature of your own ego when it panics trying to paint gloomy worst-case scenarios, you have officially stripped away the power of that matrix and reclaimed the life energy for yourself. You become the most leisurely and elegant player, freely gliding through the complex algorithms of expectation without being attached, eroded, or alienated. The spirit of a philosophical entertainer will illuminate awareness, helping Elias, as well as each of us, to thoroughly understand that no matter how loud, chaotic, and full of complex variables the world out there might be, we always hold the sacred privilege to choose not to grant circumstances the power to destroy the deep peace inside. That with a witty, tranquil, and profound vision, we will know how to turn heavy pressures that once suffocated us into colorful bricks to freely build the painting of our own experiences. This cosmic humor teaches us how to walk through the storms of careers and the turbulent changes in romance with footsteps that lightly glide on the ground, leaving no trace of clinging or sorrow. Finally, when he has mastered the art of stepping back and smiling, Elias will realize that life is not a harsh test requiring a perfect score, but an art gallery where he is both the appreciator and the brushstroke painting himself, and he will continue to enjoy this grand game with a lightweight heart and a perfectly serene soul amidst the vast siege of reality. As Elias has gradually learned to smile calmly at the simulated rules of life's matrix, his mind can still occasionally slip back into another subtle trap known as an obsession with the future. To thoroughly dismantle this attachment, let us together gaze up at the night sky and explore an incredibly magnificent physical concept called The cosmic horizon. When we cast our sight into vast space, we often mistakenly believe that humanity's telescope can reach the very end of the infinite realm, but in truth, everything that humans can observe fits neatly within a limited sphere with a diameter of about 93 billion light-years. This absolute limit arises from the simple truth that light needs time to travel, and cosmic space itself is ceaselessly expanding. Whatever lies beyond that boundary, no matter how many radiant galaxies or majestic stellar structures it contains, will forever be concealed from our sight. The expansion speed of space in those far-off regions is faster than the speed of light, making it so that rays of light from there will never have the chance to reach Earth even if we wait patiently until the end of time. That is the cosmic horizon, an absolute dividing line between what we can know and what forever belongs to the realm of the unknowable. Now, let us apply this beautiful physical boundary to the dimension of time within the mind of the architect who is carrying many worries. The chronic anxiety illness draining Elias' vitality is nothing else but the desperate, hopeless effort to cast his gaze past the time horizon of himself. Elias always lies awake night after night, exhausting his brain trying to control the variables of a distant, blurry future, from whether tomorrow's blueprint will be well received, to which path his career will turn in 10 years, down to the sudden risks that have not yet taken shape. He attempts to build solid architectural structures not only on the ground but also on the surface of the time yet to come. His mind is like a frantic telescope endlessly reaching out past the limits of the present, trying to snatch rays of light that have not yet been born from events that have never existed. Extreme anxiety besieges Elias when he bitterly realizes he cannot control the blurry spatial region on the other side of the time boundary, without knowing that trying to grasp a distant future is just as absurd and ridiculous as making an effort to observe a galaxy lying beyond the cosmic horizon. We, like Elias, frequently punish ourselves by refusing to live within the observable cosmic region of the present, instead busily chasing after the phantom images of light that will never arrive. Forcing ourselves to plan perfectly for days that have not come is not wisdom, but the arrogance of the ego when it foolishly wants to steal the mysterious operating power of nature. Suffering is born when we pour the entire precious life energy of this moment to project into a horizon area that can never be reached, only to ruthlessly miss all the beauty existing right before our eyes. We forget that all life, all joy, all true miracles can only bloom brilliantly inside the boundary of awareness in the present moment. Deeply understanding the cosmic horizon does not aim to make us feel small or helpless, but conversely, it brings an ultimate liberation for consciousness. It whispers to Elias' turbulent soul that he has the right to lay down his weapons and give up the battle to seize control of tomorrow. He absolutely does not need to strain himself to see clearly into the unarrived days, because the nature of time, just like space, is endlessly expanding, carrying variables that no mental equation can ever calculate. Instead of transforming himself into an anxious prophet carrying the weight of the future on his back, he can completely step back, dwell solidly within his own finite sphere of time, relax his mind, and smile to accept the sacred limitation of knowledge. Once the boundary of uncertainty is fully accepted, every burden of tomorrow will automatically fall away, returning to him an infinitely tranquil inner space where he only needs to do his best with what is manifesting within the limits of his vision, cherishing every warm cup of coffee, every current brushstroke, and leisurely letting the vast universe take care of the complex tasks hidden on the other side of the horizon. When Elias is willing to let the blurry variables remain on the other side of the cosmic horizon, it is also the time he enters the most profound transformation of consciousness through the act of voluntarily laying down weapons before the uncertainty of human existence. We are often taught from childhood to view uncertainty as a terrifying ghost, as a pitch-black abyss that requires us to use all our cunning and the most meticulous calculations to fill and conquer, but in truth, from the perspective of an endlessly dancing universe, uncertainty is the only fertile ground that allows the miracles of life to freely sprout and bud. by courageously establishing a distinct boundary for the observable universe right inside his mind. Elias has personally created an invisible sacred sanctuary, a tranquil inner holy ground where the toxic winds of anxiety about the future are completely blocked outside the doorstep. Let us imagine with him his entire complex existence now stripped of redundant temporal shells, exquisitely shrunk into a gentle sphere of light entirely enveloping the space of the single present moment. Inside that tiny yet immensely grand sphere, everything becomes so radiant, vivid, and authentic that it makes one's heart throb at the beauty of simplicity. Elias' entire world is no longer endless illusions or terrifying scenarios that drain vitality, but merely shrinks down to the size of a pulsing heartbeat in his chest, exactly the size of a steady breath slowly filling his lungs, carrying the pristine life force of the night. All the magnificent beauty of blinking neon lights under the signature foggy rain of the Seattle cityscape, all the deeply human, lingering melancholy when a heartfelt blueprint is incomplete, and most importantly, the entire supreme power of a free living being, all rest neatly, completely, and with absolute safety inside the volume of that miraculous sphere. That the true power of Elias, or of any of us, has never lied in being able to bend time or force tomorrow to play out exactly according to the perfect scripts drawn up by a prideful ego, but it fully resides in the ability to relax completely, to be thoroughly present, receiving every incident with an unperturbed smile right at this very second. Just like a wise astronomer who thoroughly understands nature's limits and never wastes tears or anger on stars that eternally lie beyond the observation range of the telescope, Elias now learns to wave goodbye to the habit of desperately chasing after magnificent rays of light that have not yet arrived from an undetermined future. He realizes a sharp truth that the frantic effort to reach outside the sphere of the present to pull in an unformed tomorrow only makes the soul's eyes blind to the glorious brilliance of the stars that are truly shining directly overhead right now. That when stripping away the rigid shell of someone who always craves absolute control, he discovers the boundary of the present sphere is not an imprisoning jail or a line restricting growth, but is actually the warmest and most forgiving embrace, comforting and shielding the deep wounds caused by his own irrational expectations. Every murmuring sound of the traffic drifting on the wet streets reflecting pale yellow streaks, every subtle vibration on his fingertips when touching the cold wooden desk, every thought gliding through his mind like clouds floating in an empty sky, all become the most sacred and vivid testimonies affirming his meaningful existence without needing to borrow any promise of success from tomorrow. Ultimate liberation has truly knocked on the door when Elias completely immerses himself in the center of that present sphere, enjoying the feeling of absolute safety and primal tranquility right amidst a world full of unnameable things, thoroughly understanding the original truth that the only ray of light truly capable of warming and illuminating the path of human life is ultimately just the light humbly stretching right beneath each step of our feet right in this space and right at this very moment. As Elias has found a solid refuge inside the sphere of present reality, another primal fear known as emptiness still occasionally sneaks into the quietest corners of his soul, aching like a wound that has never closed. Deep within that talented architect, there always exists an invisible deep pit of the belief that he himself has never been enough and perhaps will never be enough. Like a machine desperately thirsting for fuel, Elias relentlessly races to add onto his life the radiant cloaks of recognition, increasingly massive projects, longer sequences of numbers in his bank account, and glamorous praises from society. He carries an unceasing obsession to possess a lot, to grab a lot in order to fill the ultimate fear of the void, of the prospect that he is merely a round zero surrounded by the vast human world. Emptiness for Elias, as well as for most of us in modern society, is often understood as a severe deficiency, a frighteningly barren space proving failure, incompetence, and the worthlessness of oneself. We are taught to be terrified of nothingness, to fill every quiet gap with sound, to fill every gap of time with work, and to fill the soul with heavy materials. But let cosmology knock once again and bring us a perspective that entirely flips these narrow prejudices through a highly poetic physical hypothesis called the zero-energy universe. When great astronomers and physicists placed the entire mass of stars, galaxies, nebulas, and all brilliant things in this immense universe onto the scale, they encountered a shocking and breathtakingly beautiful truth. The massive positive energy constructing that entire tangible material world is perfectly and absolutely balanced by an equivalent massive amount of negative energy born from the invisible web of gravity pulling everything together. Imagine a digger making a hole on flat ground. The positive amount of dirt that person piles into a small hill right next to it will perfectly cancel out the negative space of the deep hole just created. The grand equation of everything, when adding up all factors of presence and absence, ultimately yields a shockingly simple answer. It equals exactly zero. This carries a profound philosophical meaning that our infinite universe, with its myriad of splendid miracles, does not need any borrowed energy from the outside to originate. It can completely arise naturally and majestically from a state of primal quantum nothingness, where emptiness is not a tedious, soulless absence, but the very source incubating a myriad of unshaped possibilities. If the entire vast universe with its billions of sparkling galaxies can freely exist and bloom brilliantly in a perfect balanced equation of zero, then why must Elias continue to exhaust and torture himself to accumulate more frivolous values from the outside world? His extreme agony sprouts from the disastrous misunderstanding that he was born as a half-empty cup carrying inherent flaws, and the mission of life is to go beg for drops of recognition from the surrounding world to fill himself in order to dispel the feeling of inferiority. But the lens of quantum physics is gently reminding him that his very existence, right from the moment he entered the world, has been a perfect state of balance that needs no addition or subtraction. The positive energy of his talents, passion, creative desires, and constructive efforts are always smoothly balanced by the quiet space of his sensitivity, the wavering moments, and even the invisible internal voids. That void is absolutely not a system error or a hollowness needing to be frantically filled with boastful achievements or toxic busyness. It is the spatial dimension of soul gravity keeping his feet firmly touching the ground and creating an immense capacity, allowing his consciousness to absorb countless novel experiences of life. Running away from emptiness is ultimately running away from the source of all miracles. That when Elias bravely stops throwing the heavy bricks of expectations and achievements into the deep pit of his soul, he will suddenly awaken to realize that emptiness inherently possesses an incredibly peaceful, free, and pristine beauty. He absolutely does not need to strain himself or stand on his tiptoes to become someone greater or more imposing, because right at this serene moment of closing his eyes, he fully embodies the perfect accommodating nature of an entire miniature universe. True peace will pour like a cool stream filling his chest when the 34-year-old man smiles and manages to let go of the obsessive attachment to possess, understands the harmony of the primordial zero, and opens his arms wide to embrace emptiness as the purest state of freedom, where he is no longer besieged by any debt of standards and also forever never needs to prove his valuable existence to anyone under this sky ever again. As we have delved into the state of quantum nothingness and comprehended the perfect balance of the universe, the seed of liberation begins to sprout in our consciousness, leading us into a cross-space dialogue with ancient Eastern sages. Thousands of years before modern physicists discovered the universe's zero total energy equation, the brilliant thinkers of Taoism quietly smiled and thoroughly saw through the great power of emptiness. Modern society in the promised land where Elias is straining to carry massive pressures always worships the act of filling up as an exclusive religion. We are trained from childhood to blindly believe that an empty schedule is a shameful display of laziness, a quiet mind is a useless machine that has stopped working, and a space not filled with intertwined goals is a pointless waste of human life. Glory is always measured by massive volumes of material goods and by ceaseless accumulation. However, Taoist philosophy brings a completely inverted and highly healing lens, gently pointing out that the true value of a ceramic bowl does not lie in the sturdy clay shaping its physical form, but actually rests entirely in the empty space within, where it can hold cool water. The value of a room never lies in the solid walls or glamorous window frames, but in the invisible empty space in between that allows light to freely pour in and humans to take shelter and live. Emptiness, through the perspective of that ancient wisdom, is absolutely not a defective hole that needs to be frantically patched up with glorious achievements or hollow praises from the outside world. On the contrary, it is the purest potential, the pristine fertile soil that has never been plowed by the blade of expectation, where all miracles of life can freely sprout and bud. When Elias truly comprehends this profound truth with all his heart and not just his intellect, he will immediately stop punishing himself every time he feels an invisible void inside. Instead of panicking and tossing new design contracts, ambitious financial goals, or superficial social connections into that psychological pit to extinguish the fear, he will begin to learn how to sit down and tolerantly befriend the emptiness of his own soul. The greatness of this architect from now on is no longer measured by the number of skyscrapers he has erected to fill the blank spots on the city map, but is honored by his ability to maintain a vastly immense tranquil space for his mind. We too, in the endless race to prove ourselves, often unintentionally forget a sacred truth that each individual is already a perfect balanced equation right from the very first moment of breathing the air of this world. You are not a depleted energy machine always in a state of red alert needing to desperately recharge toxic artificial energy sources from the outside to continue operating. All your core values, unique beauty, and greatest internal power automatically flow from the very naturalness and immense tranquility of that emptiness. Like an ancient tree standing tall amidst the wind and dew, never having to strain itself to push out every single leaf or painfully force buds to bloom at an exact designated hour, it simply roots deeply into the earth in silence, drinks the groundwater, and lets natural sap finish its miraculous task. When Elias stops forcing things, stops trying to impose the tiny will of his ego onto the grand variables of fate, and allows himself to sink deeply into primordial silence, he will instantly feel a brand new, unprecedented current of power smoothly surging through his veins. That is the matchless power of non-interference, the power of stepping back and letting everything naturally operate according to the inherent harmonious trajectory of the immense universe. No longer the fierce resistance that drains vitality, no longer the extreme fear of the prospect of becoming a faded, invisible entity in the eyes of the world. He enters a state of absolute freedom where the most magnificent creative ideas are not born from the tense squeezing of the brain, but gently fall into his quiet cognitive space like pristine morning dewdrops resting on a tranquil leaf. An immediate relief-carrying healing power spreads across his chest, dissolving all boulders of forced effort, opening an expansive inner horizon where Elias truly smiles, realizing that sometimes the most wonderful thing a living being can do for themselves and for this noisy world is simply to do nothing, just quietly fully exist and peacefully enjoy the flawless emptiness of his own being. That while Elias has gradually grown accustomed to dwelling in his own silent space and shed the burden of having to constantly fill himself up, his mind occasionally still drifts unconsciously toward an incredibly deep habit of self-torment that most of us fall into, which is the denial of one's own primal nature. Even when he has learned to let go of grandiose expectations from the outside world, the 34-year-old man sometimes still looks deep into his heart and lets out a bitter sigh, asking himself why he is such a sensitive individual, why his mind is easily disturbed by minor events, and why he cannot possess a tougher, bolder mental shell to easily survive amidst this fiercely competitive society. He carries within him a constant apology set to his own ego as well as to those around him for having been born with an overly complex and easily wounded mental ecosystem. To thoroughly soothe this wound of self-deprecation and identity denial, let us once again gaze up at the stars to listen to one of the most magnificent and philosophical scientific truths of modern astrophysics, known as the anthropic principle. When scientists diligently measured the fundamental physical constants that govern the entire universe, from the gravitational force keeping planets orbiting the Sun to the strong nuclear force binding atoms together, they arrived at a discovery that left the entire academic world stunned in amazement. They realized that these constants are fine-tuned to an unbelievably perfect degree. If gravity were only slightly stronger by 1 part in billions of billions, the universe would have collapsed into itself right after the primordial Big Bang. If electromagnetism were merely a tiny bit weaker, radiant stars would never be ignited and the complex chemical elements foundational to life would never be born. That the cosmic picture we are admiring today seems to be exquisitely and precisely adjusted down to the tiniest decimal points just to serve a single purpose, which is to allow complex life and consciousnesses capable of observation to exist. The anthropic principle gently explains that we observe a perfect universe suitable for life simply because if everything were set up in a different way, even with an incredibly subtle margin of error, there would forever be no observer standing here to ask that question. The universe had to take this exact shape to create you and me. Now, let us borrow this forgiving scientific vision to shine upon the very soul ecosystem full of self-blame of Elias. The concept of the perfect fine-tuning of physical constants is actually the most miraculous answer to the torment of why am I me. The psychological traits that Elias frequently hates, calling them weaknesses or character flaws, such as extreme sensitivity to the emotions of others, the tendency to overthink, or the ease of panicking before unexpected variables, are absolutely not garbage needing to be eliminated by rigid self-improvement methods. They are the exact psychological constants that have been astoundingly fine-tuned through millions of years of evolution, through a unique genetic combination, and through all the joys and sorrows from childhood to construct a singular conscious entity named Elias Thorne present right now. If his sensitivity were reduced even a little, he would never have enough subtlety to sketch out architectural spaces capable of touching the souls of the people living in them. If his agonizing over life's crossroads were stripped away, he would lose the profound empathy that is the root of all compassion. Just as the universe would collapse if gravity were altered, Elias' entire mental ecosystem and beautiful creative power would completely vanish if he intentionally cut away or annihilated the most fragile parts within himself. Every scar, every pain, every wavering moment is not a regrettable accident but a mandatory condition, an inevitable fine-tuning to create the observer experiencing this life. The greatest awakening does not come from trying to forge ourselves into a machine indifferent to emotions, but comes from a radical and gentle acceptance of all the constants establishing our soul. Elias is not defective at all, and he never needs to apologize to anyone or apologize to his own ego for the way his mind is structured. He is like a wondrous tree growing with a unique twisted shape merely because it had to bend itself in the most clever way to catch the sunlight amidst a dense forest. Ending the bloody war with his own internal ecosystem, Elias will find absolute peace from the depths of his chest, stretching to fully embrace both the brilliant light and the sorrowful shadows inside, understanding that he is a perfectly fine-tuned masterpiece of nature, and all the most fragile traits are ultimately sacred gifts so he can fully feel the symphony of this grand human life. Even as Elias has learned to embrace and comfort his most subtle weaknesses as a perfectly fine-tuned ecosystem, we cannot deny that the human journey occasionally pushes people to the darkest, deepest abysses where the light of understanding seems bent and entirely swallowed up. To accompany him through this moment of ultimate crisis, let us once again borrow the lens of astrophysics to admire one of the most violent and mysterious phenomena of the vast cosmos, known as black holes and singularities. In macroscopic space, when a giant star exhausts its final drops of fuel, it no longer has enough strength to support its own massive weight, and the inevitable consequence is a terrifying collapse under the extreme pressure of gravity. All matter is crushed and tightly compressed into a single point, infinitely small but infinitely dense, which scientists call a singularity. Looking from the outside, a black hole appears as a cruel pitch-black abyss extinguishing all rays of light and permanently imprisoning everything that happens to pass by its event horizon, easily leading us to mistakenly believe it is the absolute end, the cold graveyard of all things. Yet, the most audacious theoretical physicists whisper an incredibly magnificent hypothesis that the dark singularity is never an ultimate destruction. Under pressure and density surpassing all conventional laws of physics, the matter sucked inside does not vanish, but rather that extreme collapse is the very spark igniting another glorious expansion, creating a new Big Bang, thereby conceiving and birthing a completely new baby universe right inside the heart of that black hole. This majestic cosmic picture is the perfect and most soothing metaphor for the dark periods that spiritual psychology calls the dark night of the soul, a state of mental collapse that the architect named Elias, and many of us, will eventually have to face. Those are moments when all superficial efforts, all sturdy shells of a successful adult suddenly shatter under the terrifying weight of an existential crisis. Elias may find himself sinking into total exhaustion, where the architectural blueprints that were once his life source suddenly become meaningless, social expectations become tightening shackles, and the entire definition of the ego he proudly built is pulled down by the gravitational force of brutal reality. The feeling at that time is exactly like free falling into a bottomless, pitch-black psychological black hole, where darkness envelopes every ray of hope and a conventional lens of perception is completely paralyzed. Amidst that suffocating vortex, we often frantically struggle in a panic, desperately trying to hold on to the fragments of the old ego because we are too terrified of the prospect of being entirely erased from the world. But O trembling souls, listen to the wise whisper of nature that the painful collapse you are experiencing is absolutely not a death sentence for your existence. Elias' mental breakdown is ultimately just a psychological singularity where the rigid, outdated laws of a worn-out ego must end to make way for a grander miracle. The massive weight of anxiety and pressure, when compressed to the extreme, will create an internal explosion, releasing the colossal source of energy that has long been trapped. The vanishing of the image of a flawless architect is the inevitable price to pay to create a boundless empty space, allowing a newer, freer, and more authentic universe of awareness to bloom right from his inner core. Instead of viewing the darkness of depression or exhaustion as a sworn enemy to be destroyed at all costs, Elias is now invited to completely shift that resentful perspective, to let himself drift along the gravitational pull of the singularity in a sacred surrender. He learns to receive the profound night of the soul not as a tomb-burying hope, but as a worn cocoon of the deepest transformation. Just as a caterpillar must dissolve its worn-out form into a shapeless liquid inside the cramped cocoon before it can take to the sky with brilliant wings, Elias' proud ego also needs to undergo a similar crushing under the pressure of the black hole to remove all impurities of artificial expectations. When he stops resisting, stops trying to patch up the broken pieces of an expired identity, and bravely allows himself to melt completely into that silent dark realm, he will be astonished to realize that at the very bottom of despair and letting go lies the hidden seed of the most glorious rebirth. From the depths of the shattering abyss, a new version of Elias will quietly revive, no longer bound by the thirst to prove himself, no longer fearful of uncertain crossroads, but carrying within the vast breath of a newly born inner universe, pristine, free, and forever liberated from the heavy gravitational pull of the sorrows belonging to a past world. As the seed of magnificent rebirth bloomed right from the ultimate singularity of pain, Elias gently pushed the door to step out onto the balcony of his apartment in the city of Seattle. A cold wind carrying the signature mist from Puget Sound blew past, caressing his hair, sweeping away the remnants of the inner storms that had just ended. He softly gazed up at the immense night sky, stretched his shoulders, and took a deep breath so the air filled his lungs. Right at that sacred moment, The murmuring car horns down the sleepless street and the pulsing beat of his heart seemed to blend as one, creating a soothing symphony of continuing life. Standing at the intersection of space and time, Elias decided to completely let go of the illusion of control, the sharp weapon that had once made him bleed. He abandoned the desperate yearning to fully live every crossroad of the multiverse, smiling to accept a simple yet greatest truth that even if billions of parallel worlds exist out there, even if the universe continues to expand or branch out endlessly, his current perspective right now is singular and unique. The meaning of human life does not lie in the vastness of space or the grandeur of titles, but rests entirely in the experience happening right beneath these fingertips. There is no other place one is forced to go. There is no other perfect version one is forced to become. The present moment embracing Elias is a complete, sacred, and absolutely safe sphere, where he only needs to softly exhale, smile, and let the vast universe out there take care of its complex tasks. His mind felt weightless and free, like a white cloud drifting across the sky, ready to fall into a peaceful sleep with absolute liberation. The story of the architect Elias is also a painting reflecting the inner lives of so many of us, people who are carrying the massive pressure of the times on our shoulders day and night. The profound humane lesson and the greatest life value this journey brings is the understanding that true peace never sprouts from us trying to control every variable or forcing ourselves to be perfect, but it blooms exactly the moment we tolerantly embrace everything as it is, embracing even the flaws and scratches of ourselves. The greatest freedom is always present right here, right in your slow breath at this moment. I wonder if after listening to this highly tranquil philosophical journey, you feel Elias' story is touching some part of your own real life. We earnestly wish to hear your sincere confidences and profound feelings from the bottom of your heart, so please feel free to share those thoughts in the comments section. If you found comfort and fresh perspectives from this video, please take a moment to hit the like button, share the video with your loved ones, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel to join us in welcoming more fascinating and deeply healing videos every day. We respectfully wish all the audience watching this video abundant health, an incredibly joyful spiritual life, and may every passing day be filled with peace and relaxation. Goodbye and see you all again in the next videos.